There we go. Yeah, Strat Chat, all that stuff. We're actually at 25. This is the 25th Strat Chat. Fun fact. Here with Garrett, of course. And talking about dry pushes. So yeah, talking about reinforce. Posted a thing about dry pushes and stuff like that, and then a lot of coaches and analysts and stuff that were big in the community decided to kind of talk. I don't want to say necessarily argue, because that wasn't really the case. They weren't arguing. They were just, well, they were arguing. Arguing is usually a bad word when people hear it. They kind of think of it of people being mean towards each other and all that stuff, which kind of sucks.
It was an academic debate.
Yes. Garrett, let me find that document for you real quick. I have it on my phone, not on my computer. Rip my life. So, yeah. Trying to get this just right. No. Copy. There we go. And I'm going to post it in the Strat Chat channel on Discord. Hopefully. So this is the Twitter post that the guy made showing what he did with the document attached, and then underneath is all the league personalities and stuff like that, kind of talking and stuff like that in an argument setting, academic argument. But yeah, let me pull up my document too. Yeah, call it a debate. Let me pull up mine. I have like 3 documents that I pulled up from my own. It's kind of funny. So I don't know, Garrett, if you have access to that. If you can connect to the link or whatever, if you can see it.
Yeah.
Cool. So overall, it's pretty basic. I think a lot less than what I usually put in. So we're going to go a lot more in depth to the topic. That one's kind of like basic stuff. We'll cover more stuff in it. But yeah, so first of all, let's just go through the main rundown of people who don't know what dry pushes mean, and are just it's going over their head because it's like, I don't know, I've never heard about this or whatever, and you want to learn about this, which is why you are here. So overall, it is objective based. In lamest terms, it is basically, usually people treat it as an ult charging technique, and is more prominent in teams that can't charge their ults that fast. But basically, what people usually take with ult charging and with dry pushes is that it is meant to, you go in, you don't use any ultimates, and you purposely lose the fight in order to get out ultimates from the other team, as well as gain ultimates on your team. That is the most basic way to explain it, but it is also more complicated. Just knowing that knowledge would basically render you average knowledgeability. We will extend that here. Again, if anyone has any questions, of course, in the Twitch chat, as well as on YouTube later, go ahead and ask them, and I'll answer them live or on YouTube, whatever. Time stuff and figuring out all of that is difficult. But yeah, it's, in a lot of cases, it's simply ult charging, and it is a form of resource management, which I imagine Garrett has some knowledge on with resource management. I don't know. Do you? Cool. That is a good bonus. So yeah, let's go ahead and go through the discussion so far. Let me click my own link so I can have it on my computer. And go through that. I'm gonna switch screens to this one. Da 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 da. Okay, so 3-hour long theory crafting, dude, come on. So the document basically talks about priorities with getting old. So EMP is a good priority. Graviton's a good priority. I agree with that. Nano boost, kind of, sort of. I imagine in some cases it can be. Self-destruct, kind of. Earth shatter, yeah. Nano blade, yeah. Technically it's just Dragon Blade because you have to get the nano boost with it. And then Coalescence. I disagree with Coalescence mainly because it's a low impact overall. It mainly is just there for pretty much whatever. Otherwise, it's kind of it's an ult that's nice to have, but it's not needed to win a fight. In a lot of cases, I'll actually use Coalescence during a dry fight because it's easy to charge and it will help out with your dry fight overall.
One thing I'm kind of concerned about that list is EMP.
Yeah.
Because it's such an easy ult to get. I wonder why he hasn't just pushed.
It takes a little bit to charge though. It's not that easy to charge anymore since you can't charge it with. Yeah.
You're assuming that you're gonna come back and push right after.
Mhm.
So,
And overall, Sombra, and that's a good point. Sombra, to charge her ult, you would generally do a single dry push, where you would have her jump in, do damage and stuff like that, and get out, and then re-engage. So you'd kind of just dry push alone with her. Overall, that's usually how it goes. Mid priority, we have Primal Rage, Minefield, Valkyrie, Barrage. Yeah. Reactionary, Transcendence, Sound Barrier. Sound Barrier is kind of weird. If you try to make it reactionary, it's not really that good. Sometimes you can actually set it up. It's a mid. Transcendence you can also set up, but reactionary I do agree with. I'm trying to think of what other ults are reactionary. Doomfist is kind of under the same, kind of reactionary to if he's going to die, he pops it. But yeah, that doesn't really cover all of them, but it's a good example of each one. But yeah, that's basic stuff of just like ult priorities and stuff like that. Playing around enemy ultimates, dry engage if unwinnable fight and you have time. So basically what that means is if, let's say, you don't need to win the next fight, meaning you will have time in the bank if you lose it. Basically, the idea is you go in and you use it to charge ults so that you have more of an ult economy going into the next one. And then unorthodox positions disrupts. Yeah, I can kind of understand that where you unorthodox positions basically means that for like Graviton, you spread out your team so that the entire team doesn't get hit with the Graviton surge. That makes sense there. Diva self-destruct to make space and mess up enemy plans. Yeah, that's more reactionary. That falls under the reactionary category and is a good use to actually get out ultimates as well. I like to use Diva ults and dry pushes, mainly just because the only other way you can do it is to counter an enemy, and that's where we'll get to later, is that sometimes dry pushes is just countering. Diva self-destructs on top of you to counter dive. Yeah, same thing. Aggression or unorthodox playstyles disrupt coordinated enemy teams. So that's just weird comps, weird positioning, choking up, all that kind of stuff. And the most popular example that everyone probably knows is dive the Zen and try to get him to use his ultimate. And that's pretty much the biggest example for that. There's other examples, but that's the biggest example. Is try to jump, take weird positioning in order to actually get that. Walking to objectives is too stereotypical and easy for enemy teams to work with. Yeah, that's agreeable. Um, Mainly just because they expect you to go there. That being said, there is a lot of teams that do have plans depending on the routes you take. So unless you completely split your team or whatever, I don't know. There's not a lot of weird things you can do. In some cases, for example, like the Orisa defense on um, King's Row, that's a good example. Let me put in some bot scares so that you can have fun.
Okay, I think I understand something that he's aiming at with those primary bullets, the top priority. You look at the very bottom of that list, how to win fight with less ultimates, number 3. So it's
Yeah.
defensive ultimate, this is your post support ultimate. So essentially what he's trying to do is, get off EP so another character will use their ult to support that second ultimate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially with Graviton, especially with Nano Boost, Self-Destruct, and Self-Destruct not so much, Nano Nuke, obviously, Coalescence, all of those are kind of follow-up after support themselves, or they cause another ult to happen.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. His Yeah. So when to dry fight, they have tier 1 offensive ultimate, and you're not in a position to reliably play around it. So a good example, and this is probably the best one, is Zenyatta ult. Well, he's saying primary, so that specifically goes for like Nanoblade, and it's because against a good team, Nanoblade just kills everyone, and you just can't do anything about it. That's the difficult thing there. Um, Besides that, there is some that you can still counter, and a lot of it comes down to actually knowing what you're doing. For example, ult tracking, and so you see, let's say you are like, yeah, they have Nanoblade, then you're like, okay, how do we counter it? You counter it by either trancing, which is a counter. It's an easy counter. Press the button. It's done. Or you make it so that the Ana can't get the ult to him. So that's pretty much, in other words, you dive on top of her and try to kill her as fast as you can, and she can't get line of sight of Genji, basically break line of sight, all that kind of stuff. Stuff like that. Exhausted ultimate economy. This is if you're in solo queue, or in a very new team, or the team's just not that well ult organized. And basically what you do is let's say you've lost all of your ultimates, you've used them all 6 of them at the same time, and you have nothing going into the next fight. You have an ult disadvantage, and you kind of have problems. That's where he's getting at there. No disruption ultimates to force out unwanted ultimates. Technically, you don't need that. I kind of disagree with needing a disruption ultimate, because a lot of the times disruption characters can fill in that same slot. And then, yeah, that's pretty much basic. Jane replies, basically, he's not a firm believer that there's no such thing as an unwinnable fight, and dry fights are bad and should be avoided. So what are your thoughts on like the idea? Like, do you think there's a way around dry fights? Is it needed? Because this was relatively an unpopular opinion. Mainly just because everyone couldn't really come around the idea of, do you actually invest into those fights? Because a lot of what dry fights are is you're investing into fights, and that's a big deal.
It is an investment. You really have to. You have to be good at faking that you're not going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, after about the first 2 or 3 seconds of engagement, it's already pretty obvious it's a dragon mission, especially if you're going through some of those tactics,
Yeah.
spreading out, taking unorthodox movements. It becomes obvious really fast,
Yeah.
and especially if they try to capitalize on your movements, they don't need an ult to actually move
Mm-hmm.
because you're already going to be in a bad position. So in a way, it's kind of setting yourself up for failure sometimes. But if you can pull it off and consistently do that,
Mm-hmm.
it's fine because then you do get some returns. Especially if you have no ults to begin with, I think there is an investment to be made because you're not going to win the next team fight no matter what. I mean, if they have an ult, the odds are you're not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's been shown statistically in Overwatch itself. When if you engage with a ult, you're incredibly more likely to win that team fight. So if you don't have any ults, I would suggest just blindly doing it anyway because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
factor in the engagement no matter what. Especially just to get ult turns. I mean, you could do the poke battle, but you have a comp that doesn't allow that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a flat out don't do it as much as it is know what you're getting into.
A thought as well is because it is mentioned here on the post as well is that there's no such thing as an unwinnable fight, um, and then that the win condition for the fight is always in your hands, and that is true. Um, there's a percentage of chance that you'll always win a fight and you'll always lose a fight, and so a lot of Overwatch is balancing that. Overwatch is a pretty easy. How did we? Commander. Overwatch is generally a pretty easy kind of like strategy set because of figuring out like when to use and all that kind of stuff.
Well, a lot of it's also probabilistic. Like no fight is unwinnable, yes, but there's always that chance something goes wrong because it's the dynamic game.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the that's where a lot of my backlash for dive comes in because since it's dynamic, there's always something happening and you don't always have control over the system.
Yes.
You know, yes, you could win that team fight if you have no ults, and you could very much so try to win the team fight if you have a good probability, but you could also have that probability of securing a real good team fight. Is that something universe?
Yes.
You really have to play the odds. So that's what I meant by know what you're getting into. What are the odds of actually winning?
Yeah, so they go on and a lot of it is set plans on baiting out certain ultimates against specific targets. Every fight can be turned. Knowing windows of opportunity. Starting a fight with an ultimate at the end of the map is not good. Anti-losing conditions, not win conditions. There is a lot of like safe havens almost that you can get.
Like, what's your take on the whole like probability of winning a team fight against winning?
So, and I kind of let me go back to my notes now. So let me switch over to game so I can actually go into my notes. So yeah, that was basically the post there. I can just honestly just exit it out honestly. But mainly a lot of it is let me see where I actually have this. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip ahead to do ult dictate fights, and it really comes down to not really that much. Um, they they do have they do have stuff good about them, and the main ideas with those ults is abilities. Of course, you have your positioning, which is top dog, the easiest thing to do. Because, like, if you actually think about it, positioning is a resource. Getting to a position and having a good position overall is just good, and getting all that down. Because you can have high ground, which gives you a better advantage because teams can't get to you in certain situations. Fun fact that's the main reason why high ground's good is because it's some players can't get to it as easily. And then of course you have your cooldown abilities, which there's the short ones that are 1 to 6 seconds, and then you have the 7 seconds to whatever, like mercy, res level, and then of course you have your ultimates. Well, in some cases, and this is where I argue with like coalescence, is whenever I'm playing like Moira and stuff, I use coalescence as another orb. So basically, you have your orb, and so yeah, the orb's nice, and you get to heal. But what happens once you used it and you still need healing? Well, then you pop your coalescence, and it just allows you to get that extra resource. It's a burst. It's kind of like if anyone has seen Fast and the Furious, they mainly depend on their driving skills, but when they need it, they press those two red buttons.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, you could also argue that pressure. Some ults have certain pressures associated with them, and so having that thing interrupt ability. So I don't know. I see where you're getting at. There's a lot of skill in the game,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how you deal with that master up. Yeah, I mean, ults don't have to matter, but I think there is a fair amount of pressure behind ultimates, and I think the game was designed to do that.
Mm-hmm. But like likewise, like dictating a fight, one of the best ways to do it is by map control, and that's where the positioning comes into play, where you dictate when the fight's going to start, when the fight's going to end, and how it's going to end. And that's basically how you roll from there. And so those are usually like higher level stuff of being able to control maps, and teams that can control those maps are usually at a better place than others overall. So let me see if I can come up with any examples. You can counter position. Counter positioning is one of them. We talked about that with Zarya ults.
So maybe instead of driving ults, it might be even better to consider just like alternative positioning tactics based on ult time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Um.
I could go for that.
Yeah. There's also the idea, and I should have started with this, but I jumped ahead. But it's why does this stuff happen? Why do we do dry pushes? And overall, dry pushes are usually done because you want to lose to win, and basically to keep up your ult economy, you want to win slow and lose fast. And it's just that whole thing of ult charging. The longer the fight's going on, the more ult's getting charged because the damage that's coming through and the healing that's coming through is constant, and as it's going, it's getting ult charged. So you want to actually end stuff fast, if you're losing, and that's where if you had control over it, henceforth the dry pushes, you can actually do better. So like let's say if you go in with the idea of we're gonna get Grav Dragon out, boom, you go in, you boom Graviton, boom Dragon, you win the fight, reset. Enemy just used 2 ultimates to give them 30 seconds, maybe. It's usually 20 seconds.
All of the health that was associated with getting those skills didn't get transferred back into other ultimates.
Yes. But yeah, it's to make fights fast. And then you also want to do dry pushes with impossible fights. And yes, they do exist. Impossible fights are glass cannon comps. And these are comps that I like, where their idea is they win one fight pretty much guaranteed. And that's how they run. They don't. They have like so many ultimates, Transcendence, EMP, Graviton Surge, Earth Shatter, all that stuff that are game-winning ultimates. And they basically spend their entire time charging that to win one fight. And that's how it works. And those fights, if ran right, so like, this is a good example as well. Let's say there's 2 evenly matched teams. The team that controls their ultimates better are usually the team that's going to win. So likewise, if you make a comp that wins one time, then the other team, it's impossible for them to win with those ultimates because they don't have that skill more than you and all that kind of stuff. And then the whole thing of control when you lose. And another correlation as well, and this is where it comes into real life people who aren't like in tournament levels and stuff like that, is it's you spend most of your time doing dry pushes if your team can't charge those ults that fast. So for example, if your entire team was made up of a bunch of slow charging ultimates, Graviton, Orisa, Orisa's ult, all those, since they're slow charging, there's a good chance that you either use less ults overall, or you use more ults for every fight, but you spend more time trying to charge them. And that's where that comes into play as well.
So, I have a question with that. So you said before, that, you typically want to drag on fights for a while, reach fast. But probably the most popular play style is STRAT, where it's the exact opposite. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think these drag pushes come in with styles like dive and try to really create art?
So that's a good point actually, because dive overall does want to win faster. But on the other side of it, they aren't using ultimates to do that. So the less time they give their enemy, okay. So let's say a dive goes in and they just one-shot someone. They still get that ult charge, but if they're using an ultimate to do that, they don't get that ult charge. So likewise, the other team who died really, really fast, their DPS and supports didn't get much ultimate charge because they didn't heal or do much damage. So overall, the damage and support ultimates charge at the same rate, but dive edges out just a little bit ahead. But yeah, that's a really good point. So like overall, usually when ults are taken into account, you want to spend most of your time alive, and the other team using their ultimates when you want to die. So you want to die to enemy ultimates because they don't get ult charge off of the damage they just did. And that's you. That's.
So, from what I'm getting at, drag push good for that.
Mm-hmm. You can still dry push as a dive.
Yeah.
Um.
Matter of fact, the dive might turn into a drag push because it's really boring.
Mm-hmm. Um. Ah, hit my mouse against my. Trying to think. Do you have anything else? Oh, rip. Go ahead and join. I created it. It allows friends, so that works. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you compare a normal push to a dry push. Let's say you start going in, one person gets picked off and you're already halfway there. It's like, odds are you're going to lose that fight anyway. It's not in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just go ahead and call it a dry push and try to,
Yeah.
spread yourself out and do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Dodging them.
There's a good example of that, and it is um, a lot of Reinhardt strategy, and overall characters that can't really get out if a fight goes south. And so the strategy that they play is they try to basically go out swinging, and that's pretty much what they do. They aren't going in to actually win anymore. So like there's a whole idea of everyone dies except the Reinhardt. So the Reinhardt basically he uses his fire strike, tries to get as many people as possible, and then he charges and swing for as long as he can. He's not trying to stay alive, he's just trying to get ultimate charge as he's going out. And it's because he doesn't have the option to get out, so he might as well charge ult during that. Same thing goes with Orisa, but you kind of just have to shoot people more. You can't really use abilities to get any kills except for halting off the cliff if you can. That would be great.
Going on that, it goes back to that whole thing I talked about earlier, like what's your odds of winning? Right?
Yes.
Depending on where you're at, you really do need your odds. At times it becomes very obvious whether or not you're walking into a brick wall or you're actually, gates wide open.
Yeah. And also when it comes to dry pushes, people usually say that you don't use anything at all. Nothing. You go in, you die, you get out. And that's it. But what I kind of like to do is I like hybridizing it by throwing in one ult just to get things out. So like I would use Coalescence to basically go in, keep people up a little bit, do damage, maybe make things a little bit easy, and usually it's also a good way to get out Transcendence, because if you just point it at Zen's face and he's just sitting there getting burned, he's going to have to use it eventually to survive, or he has to kill the Moira doing it. And the Moira becomes a little tankier because she has self-healing that happens during it. There is the other idea of some teams will never have to do a dry push just because they're playing a comp in which they cycle their ultimates a lot and they don't really have to go in and do a dry push. They have ultimates always on the ready and they don't use them all at once. On the other side of it is a lot of times teams will set up glass cannon comps, and that's where that comes into play even if you aren't that used to it. Because every team has that comp where it's you have to cap 33% of the point on like a hybrid or 2CP map in order to win. So you're like, okay, I have 3 minutes to do this. What do we need to do? We need to win one fight. Okay, we just make a comp that wins one fight. Loses every single fight but one. And that's basically how you run that. See, I think I missed something. But yeah, it could be a character as well if your ults are charging slow. Just because like you're running Zarya and it charges slow there. Likewise, if your team's not as good, that's not a bad way of saying it. It's meaning like, let's say your team doesn't charge ultimates that fast, so you don't always have them that readily available. You'll spend a lot more times doing a dry fight in order to get those ults for another fight, just because you can't charge it that fast. Let me see what else we have. I don't have comments at the moment. I'll check Discord. There is one more thing that goes into dry fights is when you are in comp transition. And the best example to this is, let's say you are... Oh, what would be a good example? Eichenwald. Let's say you go in Eichenwald, attack Rein Zarya, and during that time you cap the point, but you still have Graviton, Surge, and Earth Shatter. What do? You want to switch to a dive comp that's more vertical in order to take the castle, but you don't want to lose those ultimates because you'll just lose them. So what you do is you slowly switch your team over. So you switch your DPS, who haven't charged their ultimates, over to vertical DPS players. And then you use your Reinhardt ultimate to win a fight. And then you switch off. You use Graviton Surge to win a fight. And then you switch off. So you basically, you use the ults to win fights, very similar to how they do now, and then you switch off to the better character. But during that time, you're spending most of your time not really trying to win. You're just trying to win a fight with the ult economy. And so that's where it comes into play there too. And I'll check out... Let me check out and see. I don't have any comments at the moment. Strat chat's pretty quiet. But I'll check and see if there's anything else anywhere. Seeing some memes. Seeing more memes. No, I don't. Wow, it's kind of a depressing end to it. Let me see, did I get anything? Oh, the number one thing for dry fights is don't charge the enemy ults. Don't do a dry fight if the other team can't win either. Don't be like, so it's the first fight of the game. Let's start out with a dry fight. That's a bad idea. Because they don't have ultimates either, and they don't need to charge any ultimates. They have no advantage over you besides possible high ground advantage based on certain maps. So doing a dry fight would be bad. So do dry fights by doing ult economy checking. Basically ult tracking. And for those who want to learn ult tracking, I did do a strat chat on it. I honestly can't remember what it is. Just look through the playlist and it'll be like ult management guide or something like that. And it'll talk about ult management. It's pretty much basics there. Do I have... Oh yeah, there is another part to it, and I think this is where we're gonna slowly ride off into the distance with our strategies. And it's a big part about it, is when you're doing a dry fight, have an objective. Don't go in to charge ults, go in there to do something else. So some examples is like on Anubis, people like to run an Orisa defense. Kind of like a treehouse defense. Very similar to Two Lanterns comp. But what they do is they put her up there and they put her up with a Maywall, probably now a Symmetra teleporter, and she stays up there. Maybe go up and knock her down, because it's a pain in the butt for her to get back up, especially if they switched off to the Symmetra. Otherwise, go in to force out an ultimate, or just win straight up. There is times in which you go to force out a Zen ult, and the Zen dies before he can ult. And so your best option is to just run away with it. Just take it. Be mindful of when the tides turn in a fight, and that's when you can possibly win it. But be aware of if they do pop it. There is also another factor to it is Sombra. Hacking people who you know have game-changing ultimates. So, for example, hacking the Zen. If you know the Zen's going to go, hack him and then kill him. And then he can't use his ultimate. That's another way as well. Because it's on the other side of the idea of losing a fight because of an ultimate as opposed to winning a fight because you killed someone before they ulted, and so they never get a chance to ult. So it's kind of like forcing an ult out as opposed to never letting them get it out. And that's the other side of it there. But I think that's it on my end, unless Garrett has any other thoughts or questions of his own. No? Mm-hmm.
If you're playing right, you never should. I think it's kind of a moral story.
Yeah. Because...
It's really a last step.
Yes.
You're literally planning for that.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a team that every other fight you're doing dry pushes, that's a bad sign, because that's meaning you're not using your ults either conservatively enough or wisely enough. So, for example, if you're using all 6 of them and then you spend the next few fights trying to get them all back, that's bad because you're just winning one fight and moving on. In bigger maps where you don't have to win just one fight, that causes a problem because you have a lot of downtime in between. But on the other side of it is if you're using 2 or 3 ults per fight to win a fight and you're getting no value out of it, then your usage is wrong. And that's the other side of it as well. But I think that's going to be it. Yeah, we don't have any questions. It's a pretty clean chat today. Teary eye. But, yeah. Cool. Well, everyone, thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe if you want to keep up to date, because I do post these onto YouTube. This one's going to go onto YouTube a little bit later, just because life stuff, and of course Labor Day weekend and all that stuff. And of course we have, of course, Twitch. So if you see this on YouTube and you're like, huh, I want, it's live? Question mark. Yeah, so it's on Twitch with the same name, on YouTube with the same name, and then I also post updates and information, as well as when I'm going live on Twitter with DRYD3N001. So it's basically my name, but with a 3 instead of an E. And that's pretty much how it goes there. And I believe Strat Chat, I'm not going to be able to do it next week. But I'll post an uplink on, well, I'll post an update on that. So everyone should be able to know. Thank you for watching, and bye!